Good morning. Welcome to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Whenever we do one of these things, when we notify people about the articles we're going to discuss, for whatever reason, our streaming does not want to be happy. So we cut it early. We started again. So this is the second, restream of what we did previously. So I'll set out links for those of you who are on the wrong platforms or saw that it went on and it cut. We'll try and get you over to this new stream, but we should be up and live and a good strong signal. So good morning. Wow. I guess this is going to be how our weekends.
Hey, at least the lessons learned are don't fight the red square.
We're not going to fight it. We're not going to just push through. Just cut it and start
reset.
over.
Just refresh.
Yeah.
And our day is going to be a lot easier.
People know us by now. It hasn't been perfect every single time. We're trying.
Hey.
Oh my god.
Hey, whatever. We've only done a couple of these, right?
Yeah, only a couple. Right?
I've only done 74.
Oh my gosh.
Goodness.
Well, anyways, good morning. Any kind of topical things? Anything you guys have been noodling on here recently that you've learned about?
The only thing that I have is I want to thank Seth because this podcast, not
Whoa.
only do we have amazing content or at least good ideas, but just terrible execution. But we have great
improvement, Tommy.
Constructive feedback, yes.
Yeah.
But we also have great little tidbits that I think you could use in your organization. So the one I actually just used yesterday was I was talking about data governance at the organization, and I was like, we really need to put some investment in, because here's the thing. This is one of those things that it's not a problem until it's a problem. And that's a direct Seth Bauer quote.
Oh, that's a good one.
And everyone's feedback was, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah. Is that
But I can give you quotes, man.
well, those little tidbits you can apply in your organization to your clients.
If it ain't saving money, it isn't. If it isn't making money or saving money, we don't do it.
I've totally copyrighted that kind of thing. I'm like, yeah.
The one that goes along with that, like if you spend any time in business intelligence reporting, right? You like the other phrase that I use all the time is reporting is never important
Until it is.
It's the only thing that's important, right?
Yes, exactly.
Nobody thinks about it.
Yeah, it's an afterthought.
It's like it's this thing at the end of the solution. You have all these developers building the coolest thing ever, and then it's like, oh, we can't see it. Like, what's going on? Like, oh, now it's important that I understand how all this stuff works. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That's also very, I think that's very telling as well, because it feels like there's a lot of half requirements initially. They're like, oh yeah, that'll be fine. Just throw this and this on the page.
Right?
And,
like you are constantly as a BI person, right? Just hammer it. Can I get the schema? What change did you make? Why did you do it? What does that mean? Like, because you have to make sense of the data. It goes into the conversation we had on Tuesday, data analysts, right?
Yeah.
You have to have that aspect of like diving in and understanding what the data is doing, how you're storing it, what are the business rules, because we're the ones that have to be the in between the source systems and what the business needs. Yeah.
And I also would say, to that end, I found, I think I even tweeted it or posted it on LinkedIn after our meeting or our podcast on Tuesday. I found a really interesting article from the analytics forums at Netflix, and I posted it on the Power BI Tips LinkedIn page, and it starts talking about like there are three. They kind of as their vision of what a data analyst looks like. What does that look like for them? Which was very timely because we were just talking about analyst 2.0 type things, and they had this visual that had the analyst, the engineer, and the visualizer. And it had all the different roles they feel like that those people take on, and gave you kind of where they specialize on, where they spend most of their time. Because we all know everyone spends a little bit of time in kind of all these domains, right? So the analyst has software engineering, infrastructure and tools, data engineering, data modeling, analytical tools, deep dive analytics or analysis, metric development, and then like statistical modeling. So they kind of had these buckets, and then based on the role, changed it based on where their primary focus was and what else they needed to do, which I thought was super relevant.
It is, and I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at Kevin Arnold in the comments, because we could just dovetail this entire conversation into the realm of than other, because reporting as an afterthought followed by the phrase, "How hard can it be to just create a chart?" Right?
Well,
Like
it gets even
I
worse when they
actually
watch you
heard that
build
one
one.
within the last 6 months, and it's like,
Yes.
man, you're right. You're
Yeah.
right.
You're
All
right.
I do is
Making the
just
charts are super easy.
sit here. Yeah.
It's the
But I
modeling all
mean,
the data to get it into the
I
chart
can
the
do
right
it
way.
myself. I open the Power BI file and I just
You just drag and drop.
create a chart, man.
I saw some guy say clicky, clicky, draggy, drop.
Right?
He said,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
it can't be that difficult.
Oh, what do
So
you guys
this,
do all day? Watch Netflix, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
the Punisher. I
Oh,
do find it interesting though, and it kind of segues a little, but like with the data governance or the role or how hard it can be, is no one thinks it is very true though. Where I was messaging Matthew Roach on Twitter, and he's like, "Yeah, no one sees these as super popular articles. Everyone sees like
yes,
how
I
to
saw that.
put this in SharePoint or in Excel is the super popular article." My argument was it's essential, and he said preaching to the choir. But I think with all this, the data governance, I think I'll always say this: our titles. How do we not have set titles in this industry yet? I don't know why there's still 5 titles that can do the same thing, or one title that could do 5 different things.
I
This
think.
all, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you
I
were.
was going on a rant, so I'm glad you stopped me. So
Well, so it's a good transition into the actual
Yeah, yeah.
topics.
Tee it up, man.
So let's tee up some of the topics. So today we're going to go through 2 articles that are written by Matthew Roach, and they're really well done. And again, a lot of the stuff that he touches is gold. It's super well thought out, very very thoughtful on these topics. So the 2 topics today is going to be the problem domain, solution domain kind of blog articles. And what I'll do is I'll put those in the chat window. So if anyone else wants to read along or have comments in the chat, you'll be able to follow those. So there's the first one. This was on 12/24, and then the second one is between the problem domain and the solution domain. Tommy, fill us out here a little bit. What is the problem domain and what is the solution domain for people who are just listening? What does that
man,
mean to you, or what does that mean in the article? Let's maybe define it first.
so I'm gonna do the best I can here, but
Sure.
basically, when we're dealing with these set of articles, and he's introducing these concepts, right? So it's problem domain is really the as he defines it, a subject area where people work.
Sure.
And this is really the different departments. He's saying and it could be your finance, it could be HR, it could be marketing and sales.
Yep.
These are people who are very focused in a certain area. A solution domain is someone who he defines as someone where it's not just where people work, but they're the ones who are helping build obviously the solution. So problem domain, if you were to think about it in any scenario, is the very hyper focused area where there are, in a sense, issues. And then the solution domain is someone who's coming into that to solve a problem. And I'll let you guys kind of put your own definition on that, just so because I want to do this justice.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, for me, that's a good definition. He also expands a little bit here. The problem is BI reporting decision making, right? That's what the domain has been for a long time. Data supported decisions. And then the solution domain of that is a data model, a data warehouse. It could be visualizations. It could be the things that come into that problem domain and solve or resolve those issues into something you can action on. And again, if you go back and if you read like all the old books around Kimball and database and data warehousing, it's all around supporting decision making, basically.
Mhm.
Anything you want to add there, Seth?
Yeah, my definitions are I think along the same track, but slightly different, right?
Sure.
The problem domain to me is a specific domain, and where an individual has specific needs, and you're sort of like the customer. The solution domain, and customer is a broad term.
Internal
That could be
customer, external
internal or
customer. Yeah.
external,
Yeah.
etc. And the solution domain is I'm the individual that has the tools, the experience to solve this problem or wider problems
Sure.
across the problem domain. And I think that definition fits in some of what, at least the way I read the article, from the standpoint that all of us in an organization at some point in time are are in the problem domain, and also in the solution domain. I mean, more often than not,
Right.
as BI individuals or Power BI folks, we're in the solution domain because we're solving problems more so, um, than creating them for other people, or requiring help from outside. But
Right.
if you think about it, it's the same thing. Like, um, you need to go create a new database. You need to go talk to the governance guys or the IT folks, or have infrastructure set up a new something for you to go play around in, things like that.
I think the definition resonates very well in the first article here, the problem domain and the solution domain, where Matthew starts talking about, right, a successful data culture has experts in both of these domains. A successful data culture has people who understand the problem really well and who understand how to take tools and apply them to said problems and fix problems. So I really like that opposing view of the world there, and he says it's the right people doing the right things with the right data as a part of the right process. This
And
is it's
yeah,
that's very open-ended to me, and it could vary between business because one business might have a process that's different than another, but it works for them. So I think the idea here is you have to kind of like internalize this and say, what is the process that our company should look for, and people should make a decision on what that means to you as a company.
I find it interesting too because if you actually look at the articles, he gives another example where um another example is if you're a member of the Power BI product team,
Mhm.
like the solution domain is working on the commercial software. The problem domain is the interest of building the solution.
Yes.
And I think the biggest challenge to me in all of that, and I don't want to say challenge, but I think the challenge that he puts out there to others is even though a lot of this is well understood, this is all about data culture. And
Mhm.
that is what I find the most, I don't want to say surprising, but where I find that this is why I think he started writing the set of articles is because you have to have these concepts or at least this acceptance in a organization, in a culture, in order for this to be implemented correctly.
Do you feel like, and later on in the article, Matthew talks about where things tend to go wrong, right?
Mhm.
We have these two people on either side of this chasm, maybe. I guess we're, I
Yeah.
maybe, because we have on one hand, we have the people who need the answers. I need to know what my sales are. I need to know where to spend money on marketing information. That's the problem I'm trying to get to. On the other hand, we have people who have access to the data, can do the data modeling, can build the reports to solve said problem. The and this is where I think it makes a lot of sense to me. This is where I've seen conflict, right? Things go wrong because each side doesn't value the principles of the other side. Let me give you this a very clear example.
Mhm.
One clear example is the business does not understand or does not want to add time to delivering an answer because they want to get stuff through dev test prod, right? The business wants to say, well, why don't you just make the model? And this is, I mean, for a long time, I was in the business and I felt like, yeah, what the heck? Why do we need dev test prod for everything? That just slows us down. Let's just go. Like if it either works or it doesn't work. And so I was very much like, let's build a model, let's build a report, let's publish it and get going. But that doesn't really respect the other side of the problem domain or the solution domain where there's a reason why we have dev test prod, because if you do something wrong, you've now caused days, hours, whatever amounts of rework because you published something or deleted some data or ran a process that broke something, and now you've broken things for lots of people. So there's a reason why there's dev test prod around. So that's, to me, that's one concrete example of like one side of that equation is trying to push forward, get stuff done quickly, and the other side is saying, well, we need to do it with a sustainable approach. We need to be able to do the change, but we need to be able to do it with repeatability, right? Reliability built
Right.
into it. And one side is not valuing the other person's or the other side's perspective. What do you think about that one?
See, I was going to actually take it a step back.
Okay.
I see that. I think it go to me, there's an underlying current where it's someone's value or perception of the other's value. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. But
Mm-hmm.
even before the dev test prod, it's really in any organization, how does the finance team or how does the organization perceive the business intelligence user or author or department? And do they see them as they're going to provide us a solution? Or is there perception? We kind of talked about this in the last episode.
Yep.
Where is it, or just build me a report, build me a visual, that commodity of data. I just show me the data and I can handle it. Not you can come in and solve a process. You can come in and understand my business to help me save money or make money. And that perception is in a sense, I say where the issue is, because that's what culture is. We've talked about culture. Another Seth, not a Seth quote, but he's the only one used it on the podcast ad nauseum. But
That is
it's true.
totally a Seth phrase.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like he thought of it,
And
which would have been very, very smart. But the idea,
he reads a lot. He reads a lot. It's good.
He does really, yes, he does. But the idea is, when we've talked about culture, we said, okay, what is culture? Forget data culture. What is culture? It's about my perceived value towards something. How
Yes.
do I value something? And I think a lot of the issues is people don't have that value towards the BI team or the business intelligence product.
Ugh, there's so much stuff here to unpack. Go ahead, Seth. You got something to say. You took a big breath.
Yeah.
Well,
He's ramping up.
in realizing, well, I've read Matthew's articles, right? And then, but in prep up to today, didn't read like the core one we're talking about again. But I'm actually happy because I'm catching up on it now, because in the previous articles, right, I think he outlined some of the key challenges that are happening within an organization, right? And in the first one that I'm going to start, he makes a comparison of where the problem domain makes a request to a solution domain,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
They have a need, and one of the mistakes that happen between products and solution domains is the product domain
Pro-
tells the solution
problem domain, right? You're saying
how to
problem, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
problem. They tell the problem domain tells the solution domain
Yes.
how to solution,
Yes.
Yes.
right?
That's, yeah.
And the analogy he makes, I think, is the order. You go into the fanciest restaurant in the world, and the person ordering tells the chef to go make them something that's not on the menu, right? Like,
Mhm.
I don't care about your expertise. Go make me a cheeseburger, right?
I need a table, a wide
Right.
table in a Power BI.
Right.
Make me
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Go build me this thing, because that's going to solve my problem, a hunger. And the solution person, right, could be like, well, in any outlines, like, you could respond different ways. Either the chef kicks him out, the chef has somebody else kick him out, or he builds them exactly what they want, which
Mhm.
is probably like fills a need, but it's not giving them the experience they could have had, right? And I think where the reason I'm bringing that up is, if I think about even the Twitter conversation around where people are spending most of their time, a lot of times the problem domain folks are going to solution people who are line cooks. They aren't chefs,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
They don't have the experience, and or they aren't in a position where they have the higher level organizational needs in mind, and they're doers. They just do. You have a request, I'll go do your thing. You have a request, I'll go do your thing. And what this is doing is presenting the challenge, I think, that is outlined in the problem and solution domain conversation, where his second article talks about how the most interesting jobs are those that are between the problem and solution domain.
Yes.
So if you think about it, it's like, we talk about this a lot in, like, how do you suss out, how do you get the information you need between, this chasm, and whether that's a small organization where it's puzzle pieces, or giant organizations where it's the continental divide, right?
Mhm.
Like, the problem still exists there. And why I love this conversation, because I have a million ideas, because I live in this space, and I think there are specific, like, a lot of different thoughts I have around how do you bridge this gap in an organization. We talk about it in requests, right, where you are asking as many questions as possible, empathy, trying to understand how they're going to use it. Are you solving their problem, or just throwing a table at them because that's what they want and need. And
No.
this goes for internal and external customers. So I'm gonna pause there because I covered probably three blogs, parts of the three blogs, but I think he's teed this up really well in how we're talking about this specific problem domain and how do you bridge this gap, because it is one of the most challenging things I think any organization has, just in different ways. And what you outlined is my first point that I was going to make, Tommy, which is misaligned expectations between these groups cause a lot of friction, because somehow there's a request or a need that's not getting fulfilled, and either the solution domain is not aligned with the things they should be working on, or the problem domain thinks they should be working on something that isn't aligned with the organization.
Yeah.
Oh man.
This is really good. So this is also, I think this is an appropriate time. I'll throw in here as well. There's a phrase that we use at Power BI Tips. It's kind of like, it's one I coined probably a couple years ago. It's the act like the business but think like IT. And it's kind of the idea of like bridging that gap, that chasm between both sides, right? You need to be nimble, you need to be agile, you need to, clearly define what your problem statement is, but you need to do it in a sustainable, IT kind of thought about or process. So you really do need to think about things from both the problem and the solution domain. I really like in the second article, when that's written on 1231, between the problem domain and the solution, there's a really good articulated graph here, or a little visual in the middle of the page. So Matthew is part of the CAT team, customer advisory team. I think it's what it stands for. Is that the CAT team is?
Yeah, customer advisory team.
So this is a team of individuals that are very well versed in what the product does. So they are super deep into the technical weeds on the solution domain, on the software developers, the guys making the code to build the application, right? They're very involved there, but yet they also have the ear of the customer, which is the problem domain. These are the people that are purchasing said Power BI product and consuming it on a daily basis. So he spans that gap. His team is the individual team that's taking customer complaints and bringing it to the product team and saying, these are where the pain points are, this is where the challenge is. And then he's also the relayer of what is technically possible from the solution side and giving that back to the domain side. So his role right now really is that sit in the middle type role to intercede on both sides of the spectrum, I guess. I really thought that diagram was very indicative of how that works.
Yes. both things, right? Like,
yeah.
But the thing to point out here is, like, if you think about how he has his foot in both places,
yeah,
right? It creates unique challenges from the standpoint that I highly doubt, like, well, they want to solve a specific customer problem. If the CAT team's engaged with a customer, it's a big customer. So they're solving problems there, but I think where potentially a lot of this would be coming from is, think about the experience these individuals are getting, right? You go from not one big customer, but 5 or 10, and all of them have specific requests that are significant to their organization. But if you have 5 of those that you've covered, or 10 that you've covered, you might start seeing, if you're tuned into it, bigger problems or bigger solutions that would kind of cover a lot of these very specific organizational problems, right? And this is, I think, the challenge that I have for my folks in my organization. I think that we need to but like that we promote is call it think outside the box, call it taking ownership. You think about, do you understand your organizational, the business objectives? Are you looking at the specific problems that you're getting on an everyday basis and thinking about a bigger solution? A perfect example of this is the whole conversation about virtuous waste. I have the same bug come in every single day.
Yes.
It's just slightly different between a client or something like that.
Yep.
Right. The difference is the line cook is just going to make the salad. right?
Yep.
The chef is going to go, all these customers are coming in and they're requesting this same thing over and over because it's the new fad. I'm going to create my own version of this dish and solve that problem right away, so
Yep.
that like people aren't requesting, the same thing. In the same way with business, it's like, okay, I see this same bug happening. What is the core root cause issue of this? And let's go solve that problem,
Yes.
because that's going to remove a whole swath of bug requests, right? And this is why I think, like in that first article, the difference in why some of our blog articles are the number one hits are because the vast majority of people and their focus is all on being a line chef, a line cook,
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
right? And I think where the value of this podcast comes in is, I think a lot of our conversations are around, hey, how do you get from being a line cook to a chef? Because it's not just, it doesn't happen overnight. It
And-
requires that you know your recipes. It requires that you spend time investing in, a thing you love doing. And eventually, with that experience, with that knowledge, you start to create your own dishes. You start to see things in a different way. And that was very poignant to me as I kept reading through these articles, because some of these divides may be organizational or business unit driven, but at the same time, these divides exist because you have line cooks on both sides, or you have, the lay person sitting at the table requesting the thing that they love, and they've never expanded their culinary, taste buds.
Yeah.
And all they eat is cheeseburger and fries.
Right.
This
And
conversation is
there's
making me
so mu-
hungry. I want to eat now.
I know. The Explicit Measures podcast, changing lives one data application at a time.
One data burger at a
So-
time.
There's a few things. Oh man, I wish I was smarter because I could actually form everything. This is such a good topic.
Well, I'm gonna have to
But-
listen to this one at
but-
half speed because Seth just
Yeah.
dropped. I'm literally trying to like write out
Some
all
truth
the things
bombs,
that he was
yeah.
saying of the knowledge bomb drops that I
Well-
felt like I resonated with. There's a
But-
whole bunch here.
Well, let me take a step back because everything you said, Seth, is absolutely right on. And I think the idea of having a foot in both doors, becoming the chef, but that can't just happen in a vacuum. Like I don't believe someone can just choose to become a chef on their own. Like, because in order to be a chef,
Right on.
Oh
Yeah, right
man,
on.
oh man, this is getting
So-
good. I like it where this
so-
is going.
but in order to become a chef at the company, and the analogy, I almost did that perfect, is you have to have authority. You have to, in a sense, be compensated. And I'm not saying just in salary, but you have to have the budget, the staffing, and the authority to do so, to implement those ideas. Because if you're the chef and you're coming up with the new, dish, you are the one putting it on the menu and you're the one serving it. There's no one saying, well, no, you don't need that. I think a lot of people, the majority of people who are, dealing with Power BI, and I'll tell you what, we segued our episode topics perfectly from this week, from our previous episode to this one, where if someone's in that, they're just that general commodity creating the reports, how do you transform yourself? Because you can have the skills, you can start,
This is a great topic.
trying to say, I'm going to grow the skills to become a chef. I'm going to grow the skills to become the solution architect or the solution domain expert. But if the people at the company, again, going back to the culture, don't perceive you, therefore don't give you the credibility or the authority to do so, you can't implement anything. So therein lies the question: what does one do, or what does one organization do to begin to, one, perceive someone in this sphere as a chef, and then allow them to make those decisions? Because that is essential.
This is great. I don't know if I'm gonna have a good answer on this one.
I'm kind of following, but not right. Like if my goal as a chef, like as somebody who's growing, right, is to be a top-notch chef, I'm not going to work in a cafeteria, right?
Okay.
Like if your organization is one that doesn't need any fancy BI and you're bored out of your mind, go find a different restaurant, right?
But it's also
I guess that's what you're outlining to me
No,
in your
so-
example.
No,
So
I
would
think
say-
Tommy's
yeah.
saying. I think how I'm perceiving this, right? So you can't just choose to be a chef.
Right.
There's some things that come along with it, right? So I can't just choose to be like the solution architect to be a BI person. However, there are things you can go learn from other people, research other things, and you basically apply training to yourself. So this I think fits very well with our self-guided learning or getting teaching on things, right? So how fast do you want to get there? So I think part of this is you're spending time reading books, building your own data models, you're getting training from other individuals, or you're spending time and or money to go to SQL BI's training, go through those DAX things, become a DAX
Yeah.
expert. So I think there's a set of skills that you need to use, and it's this concept of use it or lose it kind of thing, right? You have to sharpen those skills to become better at them, and the more you hone in on those skills, the more you focus on refining how to model data, understanding star schemas, having empathy for the business, and in working with the business to understand they're asking for A, but the root cause of what they're asking for is something deeper than that, right? So provide yourself insight training, and this is where I would point anyone to go do the Bronze Delta Associates training that I went through, which was very insightful for me to not just look at the problem, but actually, find the sift out the issues and really find the core problem of what's going on here. Like what is really happening in our data, right? Being
Yeah.
able to really define what those insightful pieces of data are, to get there. That's part of the issue, right? Part of the issue is the skills part. But Tom, to your other half of this question, there's also we need the right tools, right? I can't do this kind of stuff without, like, if I'm going to, again, back to the analogy of a chef, I can't cook anything if I don't have a stove. There's certain things you can't do if you're not given the right tooling or the leeway, right? I can't use Azure, I can't use Premium. There are things in here that prohibit you from being great because the tools you're given are not as what you need.
Allow me to rephrase the question then. Um, and I think we're on the theme of Ratatouille now. We're Ratatouille for those who remember, but all the skills in the world, super talented, but was obviously not the chef. Anyways, the idea is even if you have all the skills and you've developed the skills, what can one person do, or can maybe the question is, can a single person or department transform themselves to be perceived and given the authority of a solution domain team or entity? Is that even possible? I would challenge yes. I think, and I'll give my reasons, but I want to hear what you guys think. Is it possible to become the cook and become the chef and change that culture in an organization?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna kick up. I'm not sure.
I'm
I
not
follow
following.
your question on this
You're
one.
not fo-
I'm not
so
following.
okay,
Like I'm hearing you say that so these are nebulous concepts in my mind.
sure.
Either you're
Okay,
solving larger solutions for the organization, call that whatever you want. Like
right.
if you're in a team, like what I'm hearing from you is um I'm in a business unit and I want to be called the BI team instead of being tied to a business unit.
Okay, so allow me to rephrase then. If you're the BI team, I think majority of BI organizations now are seen as, I think, what we talked about in the previous episode, where they're the commodity. They're building reports. They're the line items. We're building what people request. But I don't think organizations nearly perceive them as come in and solve our problem, so to speak, or come in and put together a game plan, have a vision. And maybe that's what I'm missing from here. It's the person who's coming requesting something from BI is, I have a report, I need a pie chart, a bar chart, and these, things. They're not asking the BI team or the BI person to have the vision for what the
Right.
solution is.
Right. The
And
chef would.
the
Mhm.
chef, yeah, the chef example. But if you were given that opportunity, or and again, that's part of culture, because that's not what the BI in most organizations' minds or teams, that's not what the BI team is here for. That's not their purpose. Their existence is not the vision. It's just build the report. If you want to transform yourself from just the line item of building pie charts and bar charts to implementing a vision for because there's a problem, and had gave them the authority to do so, to actually change, you know, techniques in the company, processes in the company, and you want to get to that point,
I think it depends on the company. I mean,
is
I
it possible?
This goes back to, is your company a cafeteria?
yes.
It,
Okay.
if it's
Yes.
a cafeteria, it's a waste of time, man. They don't want anything better than you putting out things as fast as you can make them. If you're a mid-tier restaurant and you want to go for that Michelin star, or,
Mhm.
like, get the thing, and your company wants to elevate, then yes, like, the pushing for it, like, the challenge there, I think, is pick and choose your battles. You're still going to have 80% of orders and line cooks and all the things going in and
Of
out,
course.
right? It's the 20% where the biggest impacts of the business can be made, because you're solving the bigger problem, where you're investing more of your time in a more advanced solution.
But I would also argue here too, like, I mean, Joe from the chat was saying he left his last company because they weren't able to emphasize enough on BI and analytics, right? He wasn't getting so. I also think here there's going to be a good amount of turnover, and you need to find a company culture that works with what you're into to some
Right.
degree,
Mhm.
right? If the leadership level, this is why I think Matthew, again, in his other articles, not these, really points out that the data culture leader or the executive sponsor is pivotal, and we actually had Matthew do a communication or a what does he call it, the data culture speaking engagement for our user group a couple months ago. Immensely invaluable, but one of his big points in that is if you don't have an executive sponsor that has this vision of like we need really good chefs in BI and that level of person, if we don't have someone who is at that level that can put money behind it, fund it, put people in there, you're not going to get to that level. And that company culture, either there's only two ways that I think that changes. One, you prove it by going above and beyond and showing them that there is value there and people love what you're doing and adding enough value, or someone at the top changes. Someone leaves to go to a
Mhm.
different company. And so this is one thing I think is very interesting. I've been in business for a number of years now, and I feel like there's this idea of like, well, our company would never do that. Well, it's just a matter of who's in those positions that are making those decisions would never do that. Because in a bigger company, you kind of get a bit of rollover. Stuff goes well, people move, people get new people, so people get an opportunity somewhere else, they move on. I mean, it only takes one or two people at the upper levels of an organization to change some of that mindset. And you may have a person who has a great mindset. They may leave and go somewhere else. And you may get someone else new who's like, oh, everything on prem. That's all we need to do. Everything on prem. And it kills, it can really shape the direction of where your company goes.
And I think that's my argument. I think that's exactly it, Mike. I think it's absolutely possible, and it's a two-way street where the the person who wants to transform into this solution architect or this solution domain, they need to have the vision on the onset. Like, here's what I envision what we can do. Here are some actual examples I'd want to implement. Or, in a sense, the vision for I have immediate results. There's immediate problems that we can solve with this new idea, this new culture, and the long-term goal. But also, I think the essential part of that, none of that gets completed or in a sense executed unless you have someone buying in, allowing you to do so,
Oh,
or at least
100%.
yeah. Yep.
And or why data culture implementations are so challenging and
Yeah.
fraught, right? Because in this domain, if you're one of these people that is like the sous chef, and you want to own your own
Yeah.
business, like, we're elevating, right?
Right.
Are your peers, like, do the other managers or the other thing, are they problem solvers, or part of just problem solvers, or are they part of the solutions? Like, this is why I think implementing or pushing for building a data culture is such a challenge, and more of a people problem, right? Because you have
Mhm.
these organizational gaps between units or problem in solution domain. But I think where I live is in this in between space. Who are the chefs and who are the line cooks? Because ultimately, this is a chef conversation, which is the only point I was trying to make, which devolved into 15 minutes. But, like, ultimately, like, who is carrying the solution all the way through? And sometimes there's back and forth between teams and
Sure.
divides, that in order to produce a solution, there's a lot of in between activities that happen.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about the BI roadmap, like, that's a key thing that you're trying to remove the barriers for, which is why I hammer all the time on like, well, if we're going to create all these links between these different pieces in the roadmap, you have to have a process. Like you have to understand how these relationships are going to happen, because the most of the people that are going to be navigating these paths are line cooks. So they just want you to they want to know how to solve the problem, and you as the chef or whatever, as you elevate and are creating these frameworks for businesses to operate, have to be cognizant that these divides exist, and that's what you're trying to build processes across, along with building a better data culture. So it's like,
Right.
who owns that?
Yeah.
What, like, how are like ultimately meeting the customer needs and bridging that gap all the time, and making sure that all the parties are on the same page with the directions and the outcomes. I think the biggest friction that we're talking about is where you have misalignment, either in it being a priority, either in um, what the organizational goals are versus, the immediate needs of a person. And that's where friction happens, because your time as a solution person isn't being devoted to the area that the problem person needs your focus on, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think this is like, that's a laundry list of all of the things why, or how this relates to the, the roadmap and data culture, is you're trying to bridge these things and make them simple, and let's just keep going with it, a simple recipe for your line cooks to follow, and thereby all of the people that are ordering stuff know exactly how here's your menu, here's your thing, this is a smooth running process and organization. And literally, like, that's what this conversation's about, is how do you create these recipes for success within an organization.
So I feel like we've beat up the what is the challenge or what is the problem. I'd like to move on to some more of like the, looking at Matthew's articles. I mean, I think he does a good job of defining what the problem and solution domain looks like, and then the gaps between those, and where he sees the cat team fitting, and I think we clearly see where we sit in this spectrum. I'd like to move on to what are some good suggestions for solutions? What are, like, because Seth, you got like a brain dump of other observations here around, how do we have empathy? Like, there's a lot of maybe nuggets we can give our audience around, like, how do we see some of this rolling out? Let's go. Maybe can we transition to some of that?
Yeah. Just can you rephrase the question just one more time?
So let's go. Let's walk into the solutions. Right. We know there's a chasm between the problem domain and the solution domain. How do we resolve it? How do we bridge the gap between the two?
This
Not
should
fix
take
it,
5 minutes.
Right.
right? I mean, it's not going to be a one and done answer, but it's going to be like techniques you've seen that have been used, or try this technique, or try, like, I don't think it's a one and done type solution, but
We
I do
should-
think there are things you can try to remove friction, understand what each side is trying to do. So what are some solutions here? Crickets.
Oh, you're gonna look for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, after you're
Crickets.
gonna-
Straight up
Yeah,
solution, man.
Seth, fix it.
He's
Seth,
gonna wrap
fix it.
this up in like 2 minutes.
Listen,
so.
listen. I think this is where conversations around like, hey, what's that DAX function again? Like, oh, it's some X, man. This is how you go do that. Like, that's not the type of answer you're gonna get.
Correct.
Right? Like, here are some of the things that I have been giving a lot of mind thought around. Right? It
Mhm.
is if it is ensure that your mindset is always aligned with the overall objectives of your company, because the decisions that you make about what you do and what you don't do, or how you communicate those two different areas, right, dictate where you spend your time. And you need, as a leader or a bridge person, you need to make sure that you have clear communication between, and level setting of expectations. Don't say yes when you can't do something. Don't commit to something when you're not going to hit the date, because all you're going to do is cause massive frustration in the business, because you're saying you're going to do something and it doesn't align with the business and your time. So therefore you're going to miss everything. That will piss off people more than anything in the world.
Mhm. And that burns that bridge
It
very
burns
quickly.
bridges.
Yeah.
And it erodes the confidence that those business groups may have in you as a solution provider, and they'll go elsewhere or do it on their own. So at bare minimum, what I've done is make sure that my drawbridge is up, and the castle's closed right now. until I open it again, at which point I'd be available to help you with your solutions, right? Like,
Yes.
but you clearly know from a far distance off, ain't no help coming from this guy.
Mhm.
Well,
Unfortunately, right?
and yeah, and Liz, I would really want to harp on the burning the bridge idea too, because you, as a person at a company, as soon as you're perceived, you can get to a point where there's irreparable damage, so to
Sure.
speak. Where, and I think that's really important to know. Where if you burn a bridges, or if you burn a few bridges, or do something in an area, you may never be able to recover in that particular team or group.
What's the phrase?
And I,
Trust is earned over time. Trust is broken in a second. Something like that. Isn't
yeah,
that? I don't know. That's probably made up. I don't think I got it
yeah,
wrong. Someone in the chat
It's
will get
relevant
me
though.
right. But I mean, it
Yes,
is.
yeah, it works.
Right? I mean, we teach this to our kids, right? You know, don't lie to us, right? Don't tell us something that you're not going to do wrong. And this is like a very basic thing, but like, don't. Yeah, someone's got under promise and over deliver. I think that's another great phrase,
Right.
right? That's another one that you use there. That is a taking ownership, and that is a trust is earned, and it can be broken in a second. So,
Mhm.
I like that phrase because, again, to the reporting piece, right? You are spending months of time earning people's trust with what you're doing and what your team is putting together. If you start lying about things and over promise, you instantly break that trust.
Yeah. So I would say for me, for bridging that gap is, I think, three components: is vision, execution, and repetition. And I think I'm going to harp on the repetition part, because we've already talked about having a vision and being able to execute a solution. But if you implement a process that we are the solution domain, this is how it's done, here are the results, and you continue to show people, here's how we're introducing, like, you want our help, you want us to come in to do something, here's how that process is going to work. Repetition begins to nudge people, or at least perceive people over time will perceive you or that team in a certain way as a solution domain, and coming and going, hey, you asked for this. However, and again, going to Seth's point of thinking of you as business focused, or what are the needs, you came in, you wanted a pie chart. That being said, we identified that it takes you 2 hours to, get the data we need for the pie chart. Why don't we come in, do X, Y, and Z? Here's our process. Here's how it's going to work. Doing that over time, that repetition, I think, begins to perceive you in a different way. Like, wow, they're coming in with this authority. They're coming in with this leadership. Because the other part we haven't talked about this too is, in order for someone to be a solution domain, they have to have the quality skill, or be at least perceived with the skill of leadership. I think that goes without saying, but I think that's absolutely essential. You cannot be a solution domain provider if you don't have leadership, or you're not oozing leadership. And I'll argue that.
I,
Um,
I want to talk more offline about this, because you like you're strumming a chord of you know recognition, leadership, that kind of thing.
Well,
sure, but
the chat
but I
window.
think that they go hand in hand. I can't imagine you being a solution provider and not having leadership, or not
But yeah,
leadership qualities.
you can't. That
I
is why we have these problems in businesses, because you have people in leadership positions that are problem solvers. They're not solution solvers. That is exactly why we live in the world that we do.
I'm saying, wait, what? I'm saying, for to be the solution domain, if you're going to execute or transform yourself or bridge that gap and be solution domain, you have to have leadership qualities, not necessarily be in
I get it.
leadership.
Uh,
Yeah,
Got it.
yes, if
yeah,
you're addressing or thinking about these issues, then yes, this is top of mind for you.
okay, yeah.
So someone else puts in here in the chat. I want to bring some comments from the chat that I think. So Dan, thank you for correcting me. I knew someone would be able to Google it correctly for me. So the phrase I was trying to stumble through earlier. Trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair is the phrase. And I'm like, yeah, so true, right, about the
Yeah.
trust thing.
So-
Seth, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna I cut you off again.
Okay, sorry. I want to say you're on your note around taking ownership of whatever that thing is, right? From both sides, right?
Yeah.
From the problem domain or the solution side. There is a taking ownership of thing that I think is very
Yes.
relevant here around someone, you can't pawn off the problem to somebody else. It's making sure you can accurately estimate time. Someone else in the chat was saying never underestimate the solution concepts that the problem domain may be bringing to you, because sometimes the problem domain says, again, they're saying like, here's how I think it should work. Previous solutions never solved this problem, right? And so that the problem domain side of things can come in. Don't undervalue their uh potential opportunities of, hey, they may have there's a good idea here somewhere. Invest the time in understanding what they're trying to say or communicate, and use that communication to like help you develop the right solution for everything. And one thing that I think you both guys were talking about was clear communication. And I'll throw in a little example from Rob Colley. I think he had here was, Rob Colley had done like a study on writing some code, right? This is like an Excel document. He's very big on like business things, right? They had about a page, maybe 2 pages, I don't know what it was, 2-3 pages of code. Or even let's just take an example. You have a software program. Your software program has 300 pages of code in it. If your application, whatever that is, if you told someone to just write verbatim, word for word, every line of code to make this application work, you could figure out how fast they would type. They could type out the code, and it would take them, I don't know, a week or so to write 300 pages of solid code to build an application. We all know anytime you build an application or data application, whatever that is, it takes way longer than a week to build all that stuff. Because the reason that's because is there is this huge cycle of communication that needs to happen, right? I need to get requirements. I need to understand what you're doing. I need to think on the same wavelength as the requirements or the people asking for the requirements. So, that 1 week of, just typing out code actually turns into 3 months, 4 months, 6 months. It turns into these longer engagements because in addition to just doing the work, there's a whole layer of communication and understanding and empathy that's happening to be able to relay and convey that information. And this was one of the things when Rob was talking about this, I think it was in his book, that I resonated with very well is, if I'm a person of one working in my Excel document, I'm communicating with myself. The communication speed is very fast. I can rule out solutions and problems very quickly, and I can get down to an answer that I need to solve a problem. As soon as you involve other people, or, we're talking about like the spectrum of like data modelers and report visual builders and, people in the business who are consuming those reports, as soon as you have these other people engaged in the process, you now have potential breakdowns every time you're having a communication point. And those are the things that add time to a project, because we have to amply understand what you're asking for. Does that make sense?
It does, because you're talking like essentially it's the I only have to go as far as the synapse in my brain.
Yes.
Versus a conversation.
Yeah.
Versus a conversation with multiple people.
Yeah.
Right. And this is I think a very real problem, or a real thing, that as organizations scale, you have to start building more of the process.
Yes.
Right. These paths
Yes.
that other people can easily follow, that you've architected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that dovetails into, another solution that you were asking for, which is create these clear handoffs between different people, organizations,
Yeah.
for that process to work efficiently.
Yep.
And then the other two I would say is, deliver on what you commit to, but be careful what you commit to, and be cognizant that not everyone wants to go on these rides with you.
No.
Right? When you say ownership, like, that means different things in the kitchen, right? I could have the guy who makes the best steak in the world, and he's going to make a lot of money because he can go to any restaurant he wants to, because he's the best steak maker in the world. He may have no interest whatsoever in understanding all the stations or becoming a chef. He may just want to make steak, right? And that's your responsibility as someone who, manages people, to figure out who are the ones that want to go in the upward direction and be a chef themselves. Who are the, do they have the free spirit, the entrepreneurial kind of thing where they want to be the solution guy? Well, you're gonna create a different path for them, versus I'm the best steak maker in the world, i.e., I want to spend all my time in DAX, man. And it's still a very valid path, right? It's just different directional things. And I think by stating not everyone wants to go on these rides. It's twofold. One is your own team, but at the same time, it's what expectations are you having for other people in the organization without doing due diligence. And when and what I mean is, like, if we're going to build a data culture and a roadmap, am I making that easy, or am I assuming a whole lot of things that people have to figure out for themselves?
So you just harped on something that I think is very, very important for how are you identifying if you're on the right path, and I think that's ownership. And because I don't want people from the podcast to quit their jobs because the podcast told me that we're not changing. But
I'm not saying,
if
you know what? There's a lot of companies out there looking for really good data people at this point. Like if you are a chef and you are looking for a job, call me.
If you're in a cafeteria and you want to move into, well, Olive Garden-ish.
but the idea of
find me on me on LinkedIn. We will talk because there are opportunities out there.
Well, the idea of ownership, I think, is, I don't want to say the most imperative part, but if you're being tasked with a project and you don't have ownership of it, you can't be the solution domain.
That's wider problems, right?
Yeah, that's different. That's dysfunctional other things that are happening.
I think that's a whole different, what does ownership mean should be a podcast.
Oh, that's true. True statement.
I'm gonna write that in. So,
oh boy, it's going to the list. I think this has been an amazing topic. I think we've actually hit a pretty good lull here at the end here. This has been amazing. The chat has been on fire, right? Man, there is a ton of really good, rich comments on the chat window there. Thank you everyone for who's participating, throwing in your ideas in there. A lot of them, I'm literally writing down your comments, going, "Oh, that's a good point. Oh, that's another good point." I'm adding them to my list of notes here. So thank you all for the lively discussion. This was a great topic. I believe on Twitter, Matthew said he's actually going to write a couple more blogs. There's either 1 or 2 more coming out around the problem domain, solution domain. So there may be one out tomorrow. So we'll have to kind of circle back and see what Matthew kind of puts out and read through those. And we might have a little intro next week on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, or Tuesday or Thursday. Sorry, we do this on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We might have another little introduction or just kind of a callback to this, because this is a really, I think, a very important topic. I think this is something you get into when you start talking about leading BI teams, or when you start getting a little bit further down that path than we're just trying to build reports, right? Anyways, an amazing conversation. Thank you all very much. If you enjoyed this conversation, our only ask is, if you got some value, our only ask is to you, the listeners, just share this with one other person. Let someone else know that you found value from this, you enjoyed it. Share it on social media if you would like. We really appreciate the extra share from you. We find that our people do find value from it and maybe get a couple laughs out of it. We've had people walking around outside laughing to themselves because we're such a goofball. So we're happy to give you a chuckle here and there, as well as make some entertaining and hopefully learn a little bit as well.
Changing the world.
Trying to make chefs. That's all we're trying to do. Just trying to cook better food. So thank you all very much. Tommy, where else, if you need to find the podcast, where else can you find the podcast?
Yeah, and just to Mike's point, spread the word. We love the chat. We love the community. So
it's super cool.
Share it however you can if you do find any value. If you are listening, if you're watching live right now and you're one of the people,
one of the 5 people
watching live. Well, outside of the 3 of us, subscribe on Apple and Spotify. We have all these other episodes, very hopefully similar to this, that you can subscribe. Make sure to give a rating there. If you're listening and you want to join the conversation live, as Mike said, every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central. Follow Power BI Tips on YouTube and LinkedIn so you can always see the future episodes, and make sure to follow to make sure when a link changes, because that tends to happen.
You know what? I was apology on my side. I can only do so much what the technology allows me to. So this morning was a little bit of a jump around on. We finally got the stream done. We fixed it. No big deal. We'll just kind of keep moving forward. It is what it is. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next week on Tuesday.